450K, the 450K location this evening. That should be a pretty good event. Also on Tuesday, we have Mehdi Hassan is going to be interviewing Peter Beinart. Many of you have been listening to Peter. I think he's done a really incredible job in presenting his viewpoint as a recovering Zionist, which has been, I think, very useful to hear, certainly for the Jewish community, to hear his perspective. And so lots of events, lots of stuff happening. We're going to keep this series going. Please stay tuned by looking at our website and keeping up with it. If you have any questions or comments or ideas about what you'd like to have be part of the series, we'd be happy to consider them. So I'm going to turn it over to Medea to talk about today's event and introduce our speaker.
So I'm really delighted that we have somebody who is such an expert on Yemen and is Yemenis herself. And unfortunately, it's all too timely because of all of these U.S. attacks that have been going on in Yemen. And I don't think even a lot of activists understand why this is happening. And Atiaf Alwazir is an adjunct professor at American University, teaches Intro to the Arab World, and she is a storyteller, somebody who has researched everything from art and social movements in Yemen to militarism and the intersection between art and politics. And I know her personally from 2013 when I was in her house in Sana'a. And we were chewing khat together. And if anybody doesn't know what khat is, it's supposed to give you a high. Yeah, it gives you a little buzz, a buzz. It was a wonderful women's session. We were actually in Yemen to look at two things: the families, meet with families whose loved ones were in Guantanamo, and also the innocent victims of U.S. drone strikes. So Atiaf helped us get an intro to the very complicated politics of Yemen. So thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out on a Sunday morning. I love that there is a Sunday cafe, school cafe. That's a really great idea, and maybe pushes people to wake up a little bit earlier, you know? Or go to bed earlier on Sunday night, maybe a little bit harder for the younger people, but then I go to bed at 10 p.m., but you know. Today, it was really hard to think about where do I start the story, because where you start a story matters, right? And I'm the daughter of a historian, and history is very, very important. So I wanted to start the story in 1947. But I thought, no, we only have an hour and a half. That's not going to work. Okay, I'm going to start the story in 1960s. But again, I remembered I don't have that much time. So I decided to start the story and focus on from the 90s during the War on Terror. Why? Because we are in the US right now, and I'm going to focus on the involvement of the US in Yemen. And I thought many of us are paying taxes, and our money is going to things we don't like, right? And this is why we have the responsibility to know where our money is going and also what's being done in Yemen, right? I was going to start with a few videos because I like to start every talk with reminding everybody that we're talking about human beings. We're not talking about numbers. We're talking about people, right? People's lives, who they are, where they are. But the sound's not working, so maybe towards the end, if that works, I can turn it on. Let me just move a little bit. Oh, wait. Is that working? A little bit, yeah, maybe from my... Oh, it's from my laptop. No, it's okay. No worries. All right. So, as Medea explained, the first drone strike on Yemen happened in 2002. Okay? And since then, the president of the country, Ali Abdullah Saleh, became an ally of the US. I have to stop here and say, prior to 1990, Yemen was two Yemens. We had North Yemen and we had a South Yemen. And the histories are quite different, okay? We can go into that after if you want in a Q&A. And I want to say, let's make this informal space. If you want to stop me and ask me a question, let's do that. It doesn't have to be very formal, okay? I'm not a very formal professor. Just ask me and, let's have a conversation, okay? But if we want to go back to the history of the South, the history of the North, we can go back to that, okay? But we're starting the story in 1990. There is one president for both North and South. His name is Ali Abdullah Saleh. He's an ally of the U.S., receives a lot of funding from the U.S. He's also a very authoritarian man, okay? There was a lot of repression during his time. There was a lot of corruption during his time, and he ruled under a patronage system. So people loyal to him, people from his tribe, received all the money, all the benefits, all the resources. Okay, and he again was a U.S. ally. U.S. ally meaning he was receiving a lot of money, right, from the U.S. In mid-2010, it went up to around 250 million for training, for military equipment, and this empowered him, of course, right? And the CIA and the Pentagon had a kill or capture campaign. Right? It's a kill list. Basically, the capture is largely theoretical. Nobody was really captured. Everybody was killed, right? But it's there. It's called the kill or capture. Nobody was captured under the Bush administration, and it relied almost exclusively on the use of drones, right? For targeted killings. I put targeted because we know they weren't really targeted, right? There are a lot of innocent civilians that were killed. And Saleh allowed the U.S. To do this, right? He cooperated on intelligence. He gave false intelligence as well. He used this to also punish his opponents, political opponents. They would be put in these lists and say, oh, yeah, these are terrorists, part of Al-Qaeda, when they weren't members of Al-Qaeda, right? To get rid of his political opponents. And again, this got him to be a very good ally. As I said, he used them as bargaining chips and inflated sometimes the threat, right? Because you needed a threat to keep the money rolling. And sometimes he used these funds or the military. There's a special unit, okay, that was receiving these trainings, and sometimes he used them to settle domestic rivalries. So, for example, I will get to that. He used U.S. counterterrorism units to attack people in Sada, and I'll get into that, and also attack people in the south, and as well as peaceful protesters in the Yemeni uprising. I'll get to that in a bit. So Obama actually expanded this in Yemen, unfortunately, and instead of just the kill and capture list, we had these signature strikes, and the signature strikes were based on patterns of behavior, not individuals, right? So pattern, the pattern of this person looks suspicious, therefore we're allowed to kill them. So this person carries a weapon, it's very suspicious. I want to tell you, Yemenis carry weapons. Most Yemenis carry weapons. It doesn't mean they're terrorists, okay? And so that puts them as suspicious behavior. It's a suspicious behavior, therefore you're allowed to kill them, right? And especially if you're between a certain age. If you're male, between the ages of 15 and 45, and you carry a weapon, and you go in large gatherings, right? Large gatherings were also a sign. Let me tell you something, we're a collectivist culture. We're always in large gatherings. You know, I go to the grocery store, I have 5 people with me. We just operate that way, you know? We just like to be in groups. So that's definitely not a sign of being a terrorist. So patterns became suspicious. And let me tell you, this was really sad for me because people started to change some things in their culture. So people would we love to have tea outside, especially people would like to drink tea. You see lots of older men especially having tea outside. They started to, especially in areas that were targeted, stop these things. So they started to worry about going to weddings. They started to worry about going to funerals because all of these things were hit, right? The other thing is the media headlines. Media never really tried to investigate whether the information they got was correct, okay? And everything I say here also applies till today. This was in 1990s, but it's the same pattern we see today. So these are headlines from 2009, okay? Yemen says strikes against Qaeda bases killed 34. The media is taking the government's official stance, right? But the government is an ally, a corrupt dictatorship, and nobody's investigating. It turns out on that day, actually, there was a Najala strike. 40 people were killed, civilians, okay? Including this little girl, this is the only photo I have of her, a 9-year-old Afrah Ali Muhammad. Nobody talked about this. In Yemen they did, but mainstream media here really never mentioned her. So these are photos I took in the south, in Ja'ar city, which is in Abiyan province. And this is a hospital. It's the only hospital in this area. And this was a drone strike. And you can see here the destruction. Now, people have to drive 2 hours to find the next hospital. This is not something that, oh, it's fine, we're just going to go to the urgent care 5 minutes away if we're, no, this was a life-saving mechanism. They needed this. And this was attacked by the US, okay, with Yemeni, at the time, approval. The other thing here, this specific bomber has died, I think, 5 times, okay? He keeps coming back to life. I don't know, I need that superpower. So in 2011, it says, top bomb maker was also killed in drone attack, right? 2013, he was wounded, but first he was attacked, okay? He was killed. Then in 2014, he's believed killed again. But it's the same, they're referring to the same person. And then finally, in 2018, they are confident this time that the drone strike killed the chief Al-Qaeda bomb maker. I think he was actually killed at that time. But it just tells you that we're not verifying anything, and we're just spreading propaganda that promotes the war machine, because it's in our interest here. Did you have a question? It's in our interest here to keep war. Why? We profit from it. We are selling weapons, right? We need the war to continue so that our economy keeps afloat, right? So, and the media, unfortunately, is playing their part in promoting this. Okay, how many people know where Sada is? Because it's been in the news a little bit. Or what comes to mind when we say Sada? Yeah. Yeah, it's all the way, it's the west top, I don't have a clicker, but all the way up on the west, Sada, okay? Have you heard of this province before? All right, have you heard of the Houthis? Okay, so the Houthis is actually not their official name. It's what the media calls them, right? That's not their actual name. Their name is Ansarullah, okay? How would you translate that? The supporters of God. And it's a very long story of how they started, but when they first started, they were really a small group called Shabab al-Mu'mineen, a different name, and they lived in Sada. The reason why people call them the Houthis is that Hussein al-Houthi, the founder of this small group, it was like a Sunday school, if you want to say. It was a Sunday small school. It has nothing to do with this place, I promise. It was a revivalist movement that was teaching Zaydi thought. Okay, so it was more a religious kind of school. Yeah, definitely not here. More of a religious kind of school. Okay, and the idea was during Saleh's time. One thing that he was doing is that he was really played different factions against each other, okay? He was really good at that. So, for example, in South Yemen, where a socialist party once ruled, And it was, by the way, the only, at some point, the only communist ruled country, I would say, in the region. Saleh really supported the Islamists in order to weaken the Socialist Party in the south, okay? In the north, what he did was he allowed Saudi Arabia to open so many Salafi schools and schools with Wahhabi doctrines and they believed that everyone else who didn't believe what they believed were, infidels. So in Sada, where it was mainly Zaydis, and it's the heartland of like Zaydi thought, you can say, these schools kept popping up since the 70s, 80s, 90s. And so this kind of school, created by Hussein al-Houthi, was more to remind the youth of their kind of heritage, of their sect, right? But then when Ali Abdullah Saleh started to align himself with the Bush and publicly supported the war on terror and also publicly supported the invasion of Iraq, Hussein al-Houthi, who was also a parliamentarian at the time from Sada, publicly opposed Saleh, okay? Yeah.
The difference between Zaydi thought and Wahhabism?
Ooh, I can do a whole semester on this. So Zaydi thought is technically part of the Shia school of thought, okay? But it's not the same as the 12ers of let's say, Iran and Iraq and Lebanon. So it's a different thought. In terms of jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence, it's very close to Shafi'i, which is part of the Sunni. So you know how we think there's Sunni and then there's Shia. In reality, they're not two binaries. In Sunni thought, we have multiple different sects. In Shia thought, we have multiple different sects. We also have others that intersect. We have Sufis, we have Ahmadis, we have many different sects, right? But we tend to think in binaries. It's either Sunnah or Shia because politically, that's how all of these have been. The story of the war in Yemen is it's a Sunni-Shia conflict, right? How many people have heard of that? It's a Sunni-Shia conflict, right? Yes. In reality, it's really not, right? Yes, there are now, especially, cleavages, and I'd say they're being used, these ideas are being used. But in reality, if you look at it, it's a political conflict, it's an economic conflict, it's not a religious conflict based on. But here, it was more of, they felt threatened in terms of this sectarian divide. In this case, it's true. They felt very threatened, and there were sectarian tensions. Wahhabi ideology is a political Sunni ideology founded in Saudi Arabia. It's not really, you can say it's part of the Hanafi school of thought, but it's more politicized than that. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay. So he came out and spoke against it. Saleh wanted to arrest him for that. They also publicly said, we will not pay taxes to the government, right? And so Saleh sent troops to arrest him. That didn't work, and it ended up with six wars between 2004 and 2010. Have any of you heard about these wars? Yeah, I don't blame you. There was a blackout. No one was allowed to talk about these wars, not even in Yemen. I was in Yemen, I remember during the last war, and the last war was very intense. Saudi actually was directly involved in bombing just the north, just Sada, not north, just Sada region, not everywhere else. But I remember I'm in Sana'a, and I would hear the planes going, and we were just having, dinner or whatever, and everybody's like, oh, I wonder what's happening over there. Oh, too bad. But no one really, to be honest, including myself, thought too much about it because there was silence. There was also a propaganda machine about who they were. And there was also any journalist who tried to cover it was put in jail. One journalist, there was a death penalty because he did try to report on that. I mean, he was pardoned actually. But it was that severe. So it was a major taboo to talk about. Nobody was talking about it. But the Saleh did use American weapons in fighting them, right? And this is the group that later became known as Ansar Allah, or the Houthis. So they were already subjugated to 6 wars. And I'll say something. Not only did Saleh divide people, right, in order to strengthen his power, but also in terms of resource allocation. All these, it was very centralized power in Sana'a. So everything was in Sana'a, okay, in the capital. If you're from Sada, all the resources from there go to the capital. If you're from the south, in Aden, all the resources are taken to the capital. Marib, where the gas is, the resources are taken to the capital. People don't get the profit from the resources in their region. So a lot of people were calling for a decentralized system.
So let me just understand. So
Yeah.
you said Ansarullah
Yeah,
are the same as we call them Houthis here.
yeah.
And they are the supported by Salah.
They were,
Saleh?
Yeah.
So you're the same.
no, Saleh was against them. Saleh was the one fighting them. Yeah. Later on, you're not wrong. Later on, they did join forces. So it's politics, right? But he fought them for 6 wars, okay?
Saudi.
With Saudi support. With Saudi support, yes. Towards the end. Saudi support towards the end. Saudi and American, yeah.
Would you describe this as like a civil war of sorts, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I hate the word civil war, I'll tell you why. Because in a globalized world, nothing is really only civil war anymore. Everything is, people are interfering. You know, you get money from somewhere, you get support from somewhere. But if you want to say there were two local groups fighting, yes, there were 2 local groups fighting. And with support, one side receiving support, or both receiving support, yes, from outside.
How involved was the South at this point in this
No, not at all. So the South had a very different also scenario. Since 1990, since the unification, there was a promise of sharing power, right, between the North and the South. What happened is Southern elites, Southern political leaders were very much marginalized, okay? So it became much more, I mean, you had Southerners with the Saleh regime, the royal, with the Saleh regime in power, that's true, but all other groups. So, for example, the socialists were very much sidelined in this process, right? And then you had a lot of northerners coming to the south, especially northern elites, politicals, and taking over land. You had people in the south annexing land, occupying land. You had Saleh and his regime stealing a lot of the land, especially on the coast, okay? We hear of Ali Muhsin, who was in the regime, part of the regime, who is known for stealing so much land in the south, right? And they were also kicked out of their military jobs. There was also not a lot of development in the south. Everything was going to the north. Again, everything was centralized in Sana'a, okay? So there was a lot of issues in the south. And there was a southern movement that grew out of this, calling for equality, calling for, and it ranges, right? You have people who wanted change and reform and decentralized system, and then you wanted people who wanted to secede. They wanted to go back to what it was. There was a brief civil war between the North and the South after 1990, because when the Southerners realized, oh no, this is not what we signed up for, right? And so they wanted to secede. A civil war happened between the North and the South, and Ali Abdullah Saleh's regime won, okay? So in this context, you had a lot of things brewing in Sada, a lot of things happening in the South against Ali Abdullah Saleh. And then also in the capital, there was unemployment, there was corruption, all of the similar issues. Not everybody was benefiting. When I say Sana'a is benefiting, I mean the San'ani elites and people close to the regime, not everybody. Yes?
I'm sorry, going back when you said that both sides were getting support from the outside,
Yeah.
was Ansar Allah getting support from Yemen,
From
Iran?
Iran.
Way back then?
Some people say yes. What I found when I've researched was that the support was moral support at that time. There wasn't actual at that time, not actual logistic support. They were a small group. Nobody really knew them. You will hear people who say yes, they did get support. Now, even the U.S. Embassy at the time announced that no, they were not receiving support from Iran at the time. The reason why I say both is because who knows, right? Who knows? But at the time, they were still a very small group, right? But we know that the counterterrorism units were involved in the attacks, so we know that the U.S. was involved. Also, Saudi airplanes were involved in this, so that was very clear, right? Any other questions before? So when Hussein al-Houthi, the parliamentarian who spoke out against Saleh, was killed, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, who is now the founder or the leader of the, not founder, the leader of Ansar Allah, they became known as Ansar Allah, took over. And he's still now the leader of what people call the Houthis, right? He's the brother of the person who was killed. So al-Houthi is just a family name, by the way. So if you hear someone with the last name al-Houthi, doesn't mean they're actually supportive of the Houthis or Ansar Allah, okay? Doesn't mean ideologically they're aligned. It just means they happen to be from al-Houthi family. And there are many of them, okay? This reminds me of like the Bin Laden family. We had a Bin Laden family when I went to school here, a long time ago. They weren't linked at all to Osama bin Laden in terms of ideology. You know, they just happen to be from the same family. And we have big families. So, you know, all of us may have someone we don't like in our family, right? So just because people have a certain last name doesn't mean ideologically they're immediately linked, okay? So, as I said, all of these things were brewing, right? And then even in Sana'a, where unemployment was high, people were going to the street on a weekly basis. There was a Tuesday noon, everybody was meeting at a certain place for about a year to protest. And then what happened? Tunisia happened, right? And when the uprising in Tunisia happened, Sha'b yurid isqat al-nizam, the people want an end to the regime, right? That really inspired everybody in the region, right? And especially in Yemen, there was already, the people were already mobilized, so it was easy to go to the street. And it wasn't, the interesting part about this is that it wasn't the opposition political parties that said, okay, go to the street. It was university students, okay? And I remember this. I remember seeing that post. I was in Yemen, and I remember seeing that post by a few Yemeni students in Sana'a saying, we're gonna hold a sit-in outside Sana'a University, and whoever wants to come, join us, come. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, they're gonna be killed. They're gonna be killed. But so I wanted to go and see and help them, see if I can. So we went, and every day, more and more people joined, and I was part of this uprising. I was part of the sit-in. We were there for about a year. And people today ask me, oh, don't you regret your involvement? Look at Yemen today. It was, you were tricked into believing something that, it was much bigger than you. I don't regret it, and we can talk about that later. But I don't regret it at all. So this is Sana'a University. That's the gate of Sana'a University. And we had so many people there, right? And it was the most extraordinary thing because people actually came together from very different backgrounds and believed that change was possible. That truly, when people come together, we can find the commonalities. We all had the same goal in mind. And things can happen. So people wanted dignity. We're calling for dignity. They wanted employment. They wanted a better economy. They wanted an end to corruption and an end to authoritarian rule. Okay? Now, of course, some people were afraid. If Ali Abdullah Saleh leaves the void, what's going to happen, right? And people talked about that. These were some of the tents that were set up. Of course, if you lived nearby, it wasn't so easy, right? Because these are public areas that were taken over by protesters. And if you lived in one of these buildings, you had to go through all of them. And there were also attacks during this time. So if you weren't part of the protest movement, it wasn't really the best for you, best spot for you. Some people had to leave their homes. So these are just some of the people who were in the street. It was started, I would say, by the youth, especially university students, but it was people of all ages, really. Okay, and people from all different kinds, different backgrounds. The person in the middle here, it's written "Aina diesel," where is the gasoline? I guess because gas shortages very, very common during the time and still today. And of course, every social movement, every uprising, every revolution needs art to sustain, to nourish, and there was plenty of that in the place we call Change Square. And of course, there were also, so Saleh promised some reforms, but the people didn't accept that, wanted more and more. They wanted him to step down, and he didn't. And in return, there were a lot of violent repression against peaceful protesters. I have way too many graphic photos. I don't like to share graphic photos, so I didn't put them here. But one of my jobs during that time was to document violations that were happening in Change Square, and one of them meant I had to photograph a lot of dead bodies, which was really, and take their name, take the age, what happened, send it to human rights organizations and then write reports about it, right? And there was a lot of it. And a lot of it, we would find these tear gas, or a lot of the bullets, or all of these weapons that were made in the USA. So it was part of those counterterrorism units that were misdirected at peaceful protesters. So I want to go back to kind of neo-colonial legacies in Yemen, and the role of imperialism. So the youth really thought, okay, we have something here, we're going to get somewhere. But the powers to be outside of Yemen didn't want Yemen to really become a democratic entity, especially not south of the border of Saudi Arabia. Yemen always had to be very weak. That's what Saudi Arabia wants, right? And so what happened is the GCC initiative, which is the Gulf Council initiative, came about with the support of the international community, okay? And the international community meaning the EU delegation and the 5 UN security member states. And in it, they came to a conclusion where Al Abdullah Saleh signed the deal in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, saying, okay, I'm gonna step down in return for immunity from prosecution for me and my entire regime. People were not very happy with this, but it was signed. And then the international community and the members of the GCC called themselves the facilitators of the GCC initiative, meaning they were in charge of taking care of this transitional period. It was very, very patriotic time, not patriotic, it was very condescending in the way it was delivered, okay? The moment they signed the GCC, even though everybody, all the protesters didn't want that, they began to divide all the tasks between themselves. What do I mean? France, for example, decided that they're going to be in charge of the constitutional reform in the country. So we will help you change your constitution. We will do it. And I remember it was a big meeting, and I asked the French ambassador, I said, so I have some ideas for our new constitution as a Yemeni citizen. Where do I send these to? He thought a little bit. He said, send it to the French embassy. And I thought, don't you see how strange this is? But the US, guess what the US was in charge of? Yeah, oh, do I have it there? Okay. Military restructuring. Remember, the US was actively involved in bombing and using drones in Yemen. Remember, they were already involved in the former regime's military, building up the former regime's military. Yes?
What about other organizations like the Arab League and the OIC? What were they saying about this?
So, UN, yeah, I'll come to that. UN was in charge of the National Dialogue Conference, which brought together everybody, okay, including Southern Movement, including Ansar Allah, the Houthis, people from the protesters from the revolution or uprising. Everybody was involved in this National Dialogue Conference. And it was a good time to actually come together, talk about all the issues, build some sort of foundation for the future. I have my criticism about the NDC just based on who was selected to be part of it. So, for example, the UN envoy had the last say of who can be part of it. The decisions that come out of that National Dialogue Conference, the president of Yemen had the power to decide on those solely. So one of the biggest issues was the decentralization, which everybody wanted to talk about, right? Is Yemen going to be centralized, decentralized? How? How are we going to divide the regions? And that decision was made by the president, which really caused a lot of issues. But so it was something that was happening. I would say it was partially successful, but not like the media said it. So the Western media love to say, oh, Yemen is a success model. The transition is a success model because look at the NDC. This is the first time Yemenis meet together. And every time someone says this is the first time, you stop and question them. Because Yemen has had a very long tradition of mediation. We can teach, actually, mediation. We have tribal mediation that's very strong, actually. It doesn't mean just because people fight, doesn't mean they also don't know how to do conflict resolution, right? And I'll tell you, so Arab League, the GCC was more involved. So the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, they wanted to make sure that the system remains. So Ali Abdullah Saleh is out, but the system itself stays intact. It's not that, they really need to do that. So that's why, who wrote the GCC initiative? It was between the GCC ambassadors and the US ambassador. They're the ones that were involved in drafting this peace agreement, this GCC initiative, okay? That's how much other factors are involved in internal politics, right? The other thing the GCC decided was that Ali Abdullah Saleh is stepping down, but his vice president is going to take over, okay, his vice president for many, many years, in something they called an election. One man, one election. And this was absolutely nuts for me. I thought, and they spent $5 million in a country where people are impoverished, okay? And Yemen is not poor. When people say, oh, Yemen is very poor, Yemen is not poor. Yemen has a lot of resources. Yemeni people are being made poor because of the lack, because of corruption, because of imperialism, because of colonial legacies, because dictatorships, okay? So Yemen is not necessarily poor. But anyway, back to this one-man election. I refused to, they didn't even call it a referendum, they called it an election. And I refused to vote in this sham election. And I remember the EU ambassador this time telling me, oh, I didn't see you writing about this. I used to write a lot during this time, political commentaries. And he said, you haven't written about the election. I said, which election? He said, you know, our election coming up, it's wonderful. I said, no, would you accept a one-person election in your country? Would you be happy about that in your country? Oh, this would never happen in my country, he said. So the problem with this is that we are dealing with people who have internalized this idea that Arabs and Yemenis are backward, that we are supposed to just be happy about half solutions and celebrate them, that we are not ready for democracy and we need these parents who are, you know, very much, these parents to help walk us through, right? It's extremely patronizing time. So yeah, we talked about all of this. The problem with the transitional government was that also in the end, while the National Dialogue Conference included Southern Movement, Houthis, people from very different backgrounds, the government, the transitional government that came about for a 2-year term, had mainly people from the former ruling party only, which actually also caused a lot of discontent. And they sought a lot of legitimacy from the West. So for example, when the IMF pressured President Hadi to increase the prices, they increased overnight between 60 to 90%. Overnight, no warning, you know. People, of course, went crazy. You can't just overnight, and it was right before Eid, where people need to buy gifts and food, and people, of course, went crazy. So it didn't even help President Hadi. Anyway, all of that happened before the first bombs on Yemen, okay, in March 2015. Thank you. In March 2015. Yes, I should remember that. I was pregnant at the time. And it's been 10 years. And I really honestly tell you, I can't believe it's been 10 years. It's been 10 years of people civilians continuously suffering. This is why I call it, it's a war on civilians. People say, oh, it's precise and we're targeting Houthis, and the mass amount of people who are killed are civilians, okay? So what happened is after Ansarullah seized the capital militarily, Saudi UAE-led coalition started bombing the country, started bombing the north especially, to restore legitimacy. So in their mind, they saw the international recognized government, which is the Hadi government, the one that came about from the transitional government, as the legitimate government. And many people saw that too. Many people believed that, or felt that they were somewhat more legitimate. Not necessarily very legitimate, but somewhat more legitimate because there was a one-man election. And they called it Operation Decisive Storm. It was not decisive. It's been 10 years. That's not very decisive. Maybe we should send them a dictionary. And then it was called Operation Restoring Hope. Even worse. Even worse. Operation Restoring Hope. I'm not sure what we're restoring hope. If they mean restoring hope is to daily air bombardment. It should say Saudi UAE led, not just Saudi. So they're both, Saudi and UAE are very much involved. And the US and UK were directly involved. They provided logistics, they provided arms, and intelligence. So we can't say the US is not involved. The US is very involved in Yemen. And this is why when I tell people here, I say, you have to know this because your tax money is going to kill innocent people. And we know this from other countries as well, right? We just look at what's happening in the genocide in Palestine. This is part of the same system where people are profiting off the deaths and killing of black and brown children, babies, right? The other part of it is the land, sea, and air blockade. This has been a disaster. Yemen has been basically under siege. So people and things it's very difficult for food imports to come in a country that relies heavily on imports. It wasn't always the case, but thanks to the IMF, that became Yemen's agricultural economy. We used to be able to sustain ourselves. But because of the blockade, so many people died of hunger, of diseases that could have been easily cured. Cholera outbreak, yes.
What's the estimated number of people
That were killed. So this is another thing. I'm not sure why there's such a diverse number in how many people were killed. The latest number I saw was 400,000 people that I can say confirmed. Now, I suspect it's a lot more because a lot of Yemenis don't necessarily have government documents to prove who this person is. I myself never had a birth certificate, FYI, which caused a lot of trouble for me when I wanted to get my driver's license here and when I wanted to get married and any bureaucratic thing. But government paperwork to prove, oh, this person is this person. And I'm going to say something when a body is chopped to pieces, you don't know who it belongs. I spoke to someone who his job was trying to collect the body parts. I hope it's okay. Trying to collect the body parts together, you know, and try and figure out, oh, is this person? Is this person, right? And so also families can have some sort of way to grieve them, to mourn them, to pray for them, you know. So I suspect the number's higher, but not just from the bombs. We think a lot about the killing and murder that happens because of the bombs, but there's also the slow type of death, where you're starving to death. And that is so, so, so horrible. Where a parent has to decide, okay, I have just this amount of money. I can either feed my kid or buy my other kid medicine for cholera. I need to decide who's going to survive today. This is not okay. No parent should be put in that difficult position of deciding who gets to live, right? And so it's not just and it's also, of course, the emotional impact of all of this, the years of trauma, and then the impact that you carry with you also when you're in the diaspora and you have family over there and you're constantly worried about them, constantly checking, calling them, just like yesterday. There was a huge bomb in a park, next to a park, and we're desperately trying to call family members. Are you okay? You know? Yes.
The blockades, were they, who enforces them, the Saudi-led coalition or also US, UK? I mean, who's doing that?
The Saudi UAE, I say Saudi coalition is enforcing them with assistance from the US, but it's Saudi enforced. They have started to let in more humanitarian aid now, and a little bit of wheat, a little bit of things like that, but it's still ongoing. For a long time, the airport was closed, for example, for 7 years out of the 10 or 8. The airport was closed. So even us, we couldn't travel to Sana'a. You can go to Aden in the south and drive to the north. But if you wanted to fly to Sana'a, for 7 years you couldn't do that. And so people couldn't actually leave also. Even people who wanted to go abroad for medical reasons. And this is a big thing. A lot of people need to go abroad for medical reasons, and they couldn't. They were stuck. And even when you fly to Sana'a for a long time, so you had to stop in Saudi Arabia, not anymore, but you had to stop in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has a list of people. Some people are allowed in, some people are not allowed. They were checking that. Who's allowed in, who's not allowed. In Socotra, for example, there's an island called Socotra. Very beautiful island, extremely beautiful. One of a kind, really. It's UAE controlled now. It's completely like the UAE military has taken it over. When you arrive, you give your passport to a soldier from the UAE. This is occupation. It's not just, we are occupied by different forces. From air, from on the ground, from the sea, and this state of being seized, in a blockade, really. It's also a mental feeling of, okay, you're surrounded by so many different groups. Yeah.
But wasn't there a truce with Saudi Arabia and with UAE?
Yeah, but UAE is still there. UAE hasn't, truce meaning, okay, no more bombing by them. And the truce, it came about because their economy just depleted, especially Saudi Arabia. They couldn't continue, right? And so now there's a somewhat of a truce, peace deal. It was shaky, but we haven't had any airstrikes by Saudi Arabia since. Or the UAE, though, is heavily involved in the south, very much. And in the south, local dynamics, you have the interim government, but you also have a different government or a different quasi-group ruling different parts of the south who gets funding from UAE. You have, and they're all fighting basically. So UAE technically stopped, but not really. They're definitely still involved. Saudi Arabia took a step back, and I think it's very hard for Saudi Arabia now to bomb because logistically it looks really bad if you're bombing Yemen during a genocide on Gaza. So they've taken a step back and allowed the US and Israel to be directly bombing instead of them bombing. There are talks of a ground invasion coming in Yemen. We'll see if that happens. I doubt it would be US. I think they would use Yemenis for that, or other, maybe someone else from, maybe Saudis. We'll see, But, so I just wanted to list some of the infrastructures that were destroyed in Yemen. And I'm going to read them out loud just so we really think about this. So weddings, chicken farm, hospitals, bridges, schools, funerals, school buses, ports, airports, residential homes, water plants, power plants, vegetable markets, wheat factory, dairy factory. These are some of the structures that were bombed and destroyed during the war. And my family is really funny, so every time I contact them and say, oh, are you okay? Is everything okay? They always send me a joke. It's really, like every time, they always send me a joke, oh, calm down, it's fine. And I remember this, there was, I think, one time where a wheat and dairy factory were bombed, and then the day before there was, I think, the chicken farm, and so my cousin sent me this, I think Saudi pilots have a grocery list, not a kill list. And it's just this is how people cope, right? You need to laugh. Dark humor thrives, I think, in places where, where you can't really comprehend the level of cruelty of humanity, right? This is a photo of people burying 29 children. The U.S. bombed a bus, a school bus, where kids were going on a field trip. There was a video of the kids right before the attack. They're laughing there, and then it goes, you know. And we don't hear that much outrage, right, when it comes to Yemen. I don't know why. We don't. We're not humanized enough, I think. As I said, weddings have been hit a lot too. And this is, when you see this, when you see just body parts floating around, how do you recover from that? They do. They do. And they wake up again every morning and they continue their daily life. They go to work, they go to parties, they push through. Oh, here are the numbers. And the idea of being displaced, I don't know if we think about it. We say, oh, someone's displaced. But when you're displaced, you're losing your home. You're losing your network, you're losing your friendships, you're losing your loved ones, you're moving somewhere and starting new. This is not an easy thing. And you have to do this over and over and over again, right? So I just wanted to read a poem, quickly, part of a poem by Thuraya al-Muntasir. If you don't know her, I highly recommend this book. It's beautiful, book of poetry by Thuraya al-Muntasir. It's in English. And it's called Operation Restoring Hope. Death doesn't choose who it favors. A missile does. It might go for the last field of melons, or a front gate the uncles just painted, white as bonefish, its tips reaching the lowest heaven. It can choose the funeral, kill 140, wound 500 more. There is no time for mourning. The people of Yemen are tossed back into the cage without ceremony. It might choose the mountain girl, a break in her brother's shepherd stick where the corpse fell. Now she is the sister of ruin, knows what an eyeball does when dazed, full of exile. I'll stop here. But this is what they called Operation Restoring Hope. So, this is when people started to know more about Yemen, right? When they saw the solidarity that happened between Yemeni people and Palestinians. And I want to say, I think Yemenis can relate to a lot of what's happening there. You have the blockade, right? You have collective punishment. You have people mourning their children. You have starvation as a method of war, all of these things. But even before that, it's not the first time that Yemenis stand in solidarity with Palestine. I want to say, Yemenis have always been in solidarity with Palestine. No matter the different political backgrounds, one thing we all Yemenis have in common is how we stand up for Palestine. It's always been that case. And and if you look at the South during, well, the South was a British protectorate, one of the first, I would say, protests that went out was against the partition of Palestine. And it was since then, there was a lot of solidarity between leftist parties in the South and Palestinians. During when Yemen was an imamate or a monarchy, also when the UN was first established, North Yemen government walked out during one of the UN official meetings in protest of the partition of Palestine. So it's something that we all grew up with. And today, I think, when we all know, I guess, what's happening in the Red Sea, right? Ansarullah wanted to pressure Israel to allow aid to enter Gaza, to as well, not just to enter Gaza, but also an end to the genocide, right? And to do that, they started to block or attack Israeli-linked ships in the Red Sea. In the Red Sea. Someone wasn't happy. And, you know, people have very different opinions about why they're doing this. And, you know, are they gaining politically? Are they this? Are they that? But for the people, for most people in Yemen, so a lot of people, some people will tell you, oh, we have fina li yakfina, like we have enough, we don't need to add more on our plate. We already have gone through so much. You have some of these people, of course. And it's understandable given what's happening. But you also have a lot of people who are saying, you know what? This is one system of oppression. It's the same system of oppression, and we need to stand up for it. And it will do whatever it takes to stand up for it. It doesn't matter. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like most Yemenis, you know, while they differ with me when it comes to peace themselves, they at least support what they're doing.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. So even people differ on whether they support the Houthis, Ansarullah, right, in Yemen. But many people say at least, okay, but in this case, they're doing what everyone else should be doing. They're trying to help in some way end the genocide in whatever means they can. And this was just an interview with someone who was recently hit in one of the airstrikes, and who said, you know, basically we're going to sacrifice everything for Gaza. And this is not a lone opinion. A lot of people are willing to do that. A lot of people are willing to do that because they also know that our struggles are connected and our liberations are connected. So this is from the Yemen Data Project. U.S. strikes per month since January. This is January 2024. If you see the red, there's a peak from last month of non-military targets. The red is non-military targets. So there's there's a peak in that since last month. So a lot of non-military targets are being hit in Yemen today because Trump has made it clear that they're going to do everything they can, right, to attack Yemen. And still the media calls it attacking Houthis, but we know it's not really attacking Houthis. Some may be impacted, but the majority of people who are being killed are non-military civilians. I keep saying this because every time you see a headline like this, please question it. Please ask yourself, did they verify this? Yes. Yes. That's a very good question. So did you hear? So the question was, how come in the media we always hear Iran backed Houthis? And I always say, do we ever hear Saudi-backed government, US-backed government in the media? We never hear, because in Yemen now, de facto, we have two governments. We have the Houthi government or Ansarullah government in the north, and we have what's called the internationally recognized government in the south. We never hear about the international recognized government as Saudi, US backed government. Never. We only hear Iran-backed Houthis. And here it's very, very interesting because I think it has to do with this anti-Iranian hate, first of all, that is spread here. This push to be antagonistic to Iran, and you use anything you can. Yeah. Yes. Because I think they have the same, in that they have the same mentality of this. I think it's one of these things that get stuck. For example, the term Houthi. I'm using it. They never used it themselves. They never called themselves Houthis. It's a family name. And the Houthi family are like, why do they keep calling them the Houthis? Especially ones who are not supportive of the Houthis. Like, that's my family name. It gets stuck. The media decides something and it gets stuck. And I think this idea of Iran-backed is very much just one of these things that get stuck. Now, do the Houthis get support from Iran? This has changed throughout the time, right? In the beginning, when they were a very small group, it was merely just support, maybe, just, oh, we support the people of da-da-da-da. But today, it's clear they are receiving a little bit of logistic support. That said, they are not proxies of Iran. And what I mean by that is they're not doing what Iran tells them to do. They're not just, oh, Iranians calling them up, hey, please stop, do this. They are separate from the Iranian regime, and they're not really, they're not necessarily doing what Iran is asking them to do. They have their own decision making, if that makes sense. But if you look at, in terms of the assistance, for example, Iran-backed Houthis, somewhat, right? Not to the same level as the government backed by the US and Saudi. It's a lot more support. It's direct support. It's direct occupation. It's direct ruling of that government. And yet we don't talk about them in the same way we talk about the Iranian-backed Houthis. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay. All right. So this is from my friend yesterday after the horrible attack near a park. I'm just going to read it. Dropped my daughter, he posted this on Facebook. Dropped my daughter with a hug and kisses, driving back home, calling my friend with excitement about our trip tomorrow, trying to remember things to prepare. Out of sudden, a very loud sound came out of nowhere. Huge pile of dark mist hit my windshield. I see nothing, I hear nothing. There was a car only 2 meters away from me and I still can't see it. I just stopped and decided to turn around inside a tunnel. Yes, it's dangerous, but I don't know what risk means at that time. The moment I went out of the tunnel, I start hearing people shouting, and I just flee, finding another way to get home, thinking, wow, this is the first time I ended up so close to an airstrike. I was about to be a number in a report, couple posts on Facebook, and a good memory on the heart of the beloved ones. So I just wanted to share that to say it's very emotional for all of us. And when we talk about things that are very close to home, we're also going to feel it. It's, I think, normal to feel it. It's human to feel it. And it reminds me that I still care, and I'm still human when I feel emotional. And I want to share that with you all, because sometimes we come and we want to speak and we want to be too formal, and we're like, we don't feel anymore. These are the numbers, these are this, and we act like it doesn't impact us. Of course it impacts us, and it should impact us. And the moment it stops impacting us, we need to be worried. It means our heart has hardened, right? So, who read about the signal chats? Yes. How do we feel about those? disgusting is a good one. That was all over my feed. And that was the first time I saw so many people who never share anything about Yemen sharing about Yemen. And I thought, oh, they're going to start to talk about being against the war. Because, oh, yeah, of course, look, they're talking about bombing people just from on signal as if it's nothing. You know, fist and American flag, fire. And the things that were on that signal chat is so disconnected from humanity. But unfortunately, we ended up talking about how bad these signal chats were, which they were. You don't talk about these things, right? Top secret things on signal like this. Of course, that's a bad idea. And you add people and... But not enough people, in my opinion, talked about the terrible atrocities happening in Yemen. The fact that they're just casually talking about bombing people. Hey, it's almost like, okay, do you want to go get a drink? Yeah, please. And then don't forget to bomb Yemen. Yeah. And we move on. We just move on because we've normalized that these people, that's just their life. Bye. No, thanks for coming. That's just their life, right? They're just casualties of war. Who are they? Who knows? Yeah.
The story wasn't even about. I mean, I think most people know, but like, I just had this realization where the story, obviously no one was talking about Yemen. If they were killing terrorists. But then the story became about the journalist, right? And like, that was the only thing that people were talking about, and it's all a fucking distraction. Sorry, I know.
Exactly. Yeah, and I thought this would be an opportunity. This was an opportunity to talk about the war, and about the people of Yemen. But it was, in my opinion, a missed opportunity. We focused too much on, like you said, the journalist, the signal chat, and all of these should and can be part of the story. But the bigger story was something else.
I don't remember when this was exactly. This time about signal chat, but wasn't a U.S. citizen assassinated in Yemen by a drone strike during Obama?
Yeah, twice. So, Al-Awlaqi. Yeah, a U.S. citizen.
Nothing was said about that. So, like, if the U.S. government is killing U.S. citizens in other countries and nobody says anything about it, then they're not going to care about the average Yemeni citizen.
That's true. Al-Awlaqi was killed, a U.S. citizen, but even people didn't also talk about the 16-year-old American who was killed by a drone strike, and that was in October 2011. That was during the Arab uprising, the Yemeni uprising. I do want to say, I think that's something all Americans should think about more, because I hate when we link rights to citizenship. Humans are humans. Whether they are citizens or not, we should be outraged. But I find that here because of legality, right? But I find that we want to use that American card to get people to care, and I get that point. I think it's important. But I also shy away from it because I don't want to add that level of, oh, if you're American, then your life matters more. Does that, you know what I mean? It's hard, it's a tricky one. But yes, even then, Americans didn't say anything. That's true. Oh, younger sister? Oh, yes, forgot. I'm not sure, is she American? I can't remember. Yeah. I don't think so, right? That's why she didn't make the news. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they made the news, but they did make the news. It wasn't outrage, but when you have an American citizenship, you make the news, right? When you don't, you're just another number, and it doesn't really matter. But even when you're American, we know, even today, it's very clear, there are levels to being American, right? To having rights. It depends on your background sometimes. All right, I'm just going to end here with saying, we don't need sound for this, but that despite all of these atrocities, despite all of this, I don't want us to think of Yemenis as victims only. We're a lot more than that. We have agency. Yemenis are doing everything they can to oppose this war, to oppose injustice everywhere, and they're doing everything they can to live. And I think living in itself is a form, living in these conditions and truly enjoying life is a form of resistance. You are saying, I'm here, and I'm gonna enjoy this life because you don't want me to enjoy it. And with whatever little I have, I will do it. And I think that's very, very admirable. To be honest, Yemenis have the best parties. We do. We enjoy it every afternoon. People are getting together, chewing gats, having a good time. Doesn't matter what happens. And I remember one time there was this attack, and so many people died, and my cousin's wedding was that night. And I thought, oh, of course they're gonna cancel it. So I woke up, that afternoon, sorry. Oh, of course they're gonna cancel it. The night before, people died, and we couldn't sleep. There were all these, we were hearing all these, sounds and explosions. And then my aunt calls me at 12. Okay, I'm going to pick you up. Are you ready? Get ready fast. I said, we're still having the wedding? Yeah. And I said, yeah, of course. Why did you think we're not going to have the wedding? I mean, just things are happening. And then I decided to wear just black because in respect for the morning, and didn't put too much makeup on. And the moment she saw me, my aunt, she said, what are you doing? It's a wedding. It's not a funeral. Why are you dressed like this? And she made me, put makeup on, and like, no, you need to be. And at first I didn't want to dance, and then people were dancing. And you know what? We need to also allow ourselves these emotions, because they're not opposing emotions. Feeling grief and feeling joy can coexist, and they do every single day in places like Yemen. And so I'll end with this clip to say, these people, if they can think out of the box like this, and if they can be that courageous, Yemen will be okay one day. So this stopped moving, the Ferris wheel, and they decided to just go down that way. And I love this so much. I think this is the resilience we all need.
I think we have time. I think we have time for a couple more questions if people have them. Let me put that on.
Anyway, thank you for this. Several weeks ago, I saw several interviews by Pepe Escobar. Some people might have seen him that he was in Yemen for a conference, and he had an amazing experience and met with very high-level people. But one thing that that we ignore here is that, that Yemen was obviously bombing in sympathy with the Palestinians, and that they stopped during the ceasefire, and then they started again when Israel broke the ceasefire. So, the attitude they get here is just outrage. Oh, how dare they, with zero consciousness of cause and effect. So.
I think that's a really...
Yeah, just go ahead and talk at that one again.
This one? Oh, that's
Because the
yeah.
one that I gave you.
Oh,
Just
okay.
to test it.
All right. I think that's a really good point, is that before the ceasefire, they were, stopping ships linked to Israel, and then they stopped once the ceasefire. Once the ceasefire was signed, they did stop, and then restarted now again because of the lack of aid going in, because the atrocities continued, and it is, like you said, cause and effect. It's not just, we want to bomb because we want to bomb. I guess it's a form of pressure, but instead of pressuring Israel, Trump decided to bomb Yemen.
He's clueless. He doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
I just want to recommend Pepe Escobar, if you can watch his interviews. Yeah.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
I just want to recommend Pepe Escobar. He's a wonderful journalist, and he was there. So you can look at any of his interviews, like on Judge Napolitano, stuff like that.
Thank you. Someone else had a...
Any other questions?
Well, I kind of have lots, but just the general, what percent of the population is controlled by the Houthis versus by the internationally recognized government? And what, I mean, I've read reports about abuses by the Houthis, and yet because so many people are so proud of the Houthis for what they're standing up for, we want to kind of push that aside. How do you view that?
I think that's a good question. So the Houthis control the north, most of the north, not all of it, but most of the north. And then the internationally recognized government control the south. And pockets of the south, I would say, not all of it. The majority of the population is in the north, so 70% of the total population of Yemen. So they control a lot of, most of the north. And the second part of the question, yes, they have committed violations and terrible violations, I want to say. There's a lot of internal dynamics that I could have gone into, and I thought about it. Should I go into it? But it's just a lot. I didn't know where to start, or what to focus on. That said, I want to say that sometimes we tend to idealize groups or individuals, and I think that's dangerous. Any group, any individual. It's very dangerous to idealize them. You can say, okay, I think what they're doing here in terms of anti-imperialist work is great. And I agree with that stand. I don't agree with, for example, arresting and detaining civilians who are not committing any crimes. I do not agree with that. And that's happening. There's a lot of people in detention in Yemen who shouldn't be in detention. Women's rights as well. I would say they're not necessarily a progressive group. And I think that goes with every group has things that they need to be called out on, they need to be pushed on, and we need to speak up against it. Just because we're aligned on one thing doesn't mean we're going to say okay to everything else, right? I mean, I think so.
Other questions?
I'm going to say the problem with that, sometimes when you're in advocacy, is it depends on who's in the room, or who is, if you bring that up, it becomes, oh, this is why we need to bomb Yemen. It helps the interventionists go. And so it depends on what our goal is right now. If our goal is to say, stop the war in Yemen, I don't want all your money to come to enter, I won't necessarily, that wouldn't be the first thing on my agenda to talk about. But if my goal is between me and Yemenis, so that's a different thing. I'm going to talk about that.
I have one question about the reimposition of the foreign terrorist organization designation that Trump recently did. How will that affect ordinary people?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So they're now designated as a terrorist entity, which means because they are ruling over 70% of the population, approximately, and any money going to that area, if it's seen as affiliated to the Houthis, for example, maybe you work for the government, maybe you're a school teacher and getting money from them, they pay your salary because you're a school teacher. And if I send them money, am I going to be considered a terrorist? This is, or aiding terrorists, because I sent money to a family member who happens to be a school teacher who gets a salary from the Houthis. Right? So a lot of Yemenis now are really worried about this. Can I send money? Which organization do I send money to? How do I send money? And so that has definitely impacted everyday people, because Yemenis rely a lot on remittances, so money coming from family members abroad. That's a big source of income for a lot of people. That's what keeps them surviving. If you have family members abroad, you're able to live. If you do not have family members abroad, it's very difficult unless you come from a wealthy family, etc., or have made money off of the war machine. And so it's a really big hit. This designation, it's really impacting everyday people more so than the Houthis themselves.
Okay, a couple of questions. With the bombing that's happening now, that's some of the worst bombing on record, right, when it comes to civilians? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot more. If you saw it's a lot. Yeah, the graph. They're hitting non-military targets. So in the past, it was less aggressive, and if you happen to be near, for example, if that chicken farm was near a military base, supposedly, if they always had also a reason why we hit that place, and sometimes it's true, sometimes it's inaccurate, but there always was a kind of a facade of, okay, we're hitting this because there's a military target, because the Houthis took over this school, and so we're going to attack the school. The double strike, so they would attack, for example, a place that has a military, supposedly Houthi military personnel, and then when people come to try and save the people in that building, they would bomb again because they think, oh, if anybody's saving them, that means they're part of the Houthis. Doesn't make any sense. But today, there's not even the facade. We're going to bomb them. We're going to, what was that quote about? We're going to send rain hell on hellfire. Yeah, I forgot the Trump. There's no more. We're going to bomb them, and the idea is we're going to bomb civilians until they get so upset with the Houthis that they turn against the Houthis. They try this many different countries, and that's their goal, I think, is to get people to oppose the Houthis.
Yeah, because when you ask family members, how they're doing, they're like, oh, the bombing was far away, it's fine, but it seems like it's getting closer now.
Yeah, it's in more concentrated, populous areas inside the city. In the past, a lot of it was in Sada, so people didn't know, in different regions, or in different faraway places, villages, in mountains, and a bit farther from the city center. Now it's in the city center, in the heart of the capital, where people live, and it's continuous. So it has become a lot more aggressive.
And then the other question I have is, do you have any insight on how hard it is for an American citizen now to visit Yemen and travel throughout the country?
I don't want to give advice on that just because it varies, to be honest, based on a lot of different factors, but it can be difficult going and it can be difficult coming back because of immigration here. They might, oh, why are you in Yemen? It's not, so I think I don't know. I need to ask a lawyer for that question. I don't want to give false advice or bad advice.
I know that Yemen had a large Jewish population. What's the status of that at this point?
We had a large Jewish population, a vibrant Jewish culture too. So the music, the jewelry I'm wearing right now, this is made by Yemeni Jews. It's very vibrant Jewish culture. Unfortunately, most of them have left Yemen, which is really sad in my opinion. And a lot of people, like my dad, talks about a lot of being with a lot of Yemeni Jews in the same neighborhood, and now none of them live there anymore. And so, yeah, a lot of them have left. For some time during the Saleh era, I do have to say he very much made sure to protect the Jewish communities. Again, people have a lot of facets to them. Just because he was a dictator doesn't mean everything he did was bad, right? Just because somebody's good doesn't mean everything they did was good. But Saleh did try to kind of protect the Jewish community, made sure that they're integrated into society. And yet, yeah, they kept dwindling until now we have about, I don't know, 7 families? Very little, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about Operation Magic Carpet?
We need to go back to the whole 1947 and the partition of Palestine, and let me try and focus it to Yemen, because I can go. I'll say one thing. After the UN's decision to and the partition of Palestine, during the British protectorate, you know, there was a lot of the British tried to get Jews from the region or from around the world really to move there, and even during I would say, with the Holocaust and with all the atrocities and the annihilation of European Jews, the only place they could actually go to was Palestine, which the UK itself didn't allow people to move there, or the US at the time for a while. So people were moving there, and Yemeni Jews at the time did not want to move. They were not thinking. There were a lot of anti-Zionist Arab Jews, in Iraq especially, Yemen as well. They didn't want to move. But what happened after was that once, with the political situation, they started attacking Jews in Yemen, right? Even though they weren't Zionists, and yet they got sometimes the brunt of the attacks. About people were angry about the creation of Israel, and sometimes, not always, sometimes there were a few attacks against Yemeni Jews, and that pushed people, of course, to migrate. And there was this Operation Magic Carpet, the name, Operation Magic Carpet, that brought some of the Yemenis and the Ethiopian Jews to, and they arrived in the newly created Israel. And I don't know how much you know about this, but a lot of the Yemeni Jews and Ethiopian Jews, their children were taken away from them. So some of the moms that gave birth, their children were taken away from them, and the moms were told, oh no, the child died. And the government. And they gave those kids to European Jews. They didn't want them to be raised by Yemenite and Ethiopian families. And so there's a very interesting, New York Times did a very excellent report on this in detail, interviewed a lot of the Yemeni Jews, and I spoke with one of the daughters who was taken away, and she found out really very late that this happened to her. She tried to find her parents, and she was trying to come to Yemen to connect with her roots. It wasn't the best time, but for her to go. But that created a sense of, okay, we don't belong there, and we don't belong here. Where do we belong? There's a question of identity. But in terms of the Yemeni Jews who stayed in Yemen, they identify as Yemeni or Arab first, like they're Arab Yemeni who happens to be Jewish. I practice the Jewish faith, but culturally I'm Arab. I'm Yemeni in terms of my ethnicity. They speak Arabic, and yeah, very much part of the culture, I would say.
I don't know if anyone else has any pressing political questions, but I want to end on a cultural note, if you don't mind. Can you talk about Yemeni culture a little bit, the coffee in particular, and also, are there good Yemeni restaurants here in town?
Yes, Yemeni culture. I love this topic. I don't know where to start. Let's go with the coffee because it's becoming a trend now. Yemeni coffee, as we know it as a drink, was invented in Yemen. Thank you. Coffee beans were found first in Ethiopia. There's a big fight between Ethiopians and Yemenis about who created coffee. But the beans were from Ethiopia. There was a Sufi monk who was in Ethiopia, found these beans, took them, and then went back to Yemen and made them into a drink. Drank that coffee, and found out, oh, I can stay up. And so ended up making this drink for the Sufi community so they can stay up and worship. And then that was exported to the world. Thank you. You can say thank you to all Yemenis for the coffee. But for a long time, actually, Yemeni coffee was not a big source of income for Yemenis because of subsidy issues. Like the government wasn't really subsidizing the agriculture, and it's very hard to cultivate coffee. It needs a lot of water. We have water shortage in Yemen. But now, coffee's become a very big commodity. And we see that, I don't know if you see that here in Northern Virginia, you have 2 Yemeni cafes that have just opened up, Gamariya and Haraz Coffee. They're quite popular. They're all over the country. And they get some of their beans directly, they get most of their beans, I think, directly from Yemen. But they also make Yemeni-specific drinks. The tea is very important. We have spiced tea, kind of like chai. It's very similar spices. It's also very important. And with the coffee, we don't just make, so you have the bean, the coffee bean. We grind it, but also the husk of the coffee bean, nothing goes to waste in Yemen. So the husk of the coffee bean, we make another drink called gishr. So using just the husk. And so nothing goes to waste. And that drink, you should try it. It's kind of an in-between for me, between coffee and tea. Because it feels like tea, but it's actually coffee. So that part of it. Yemenis love to... The gishr, no. The spiced tea with milk. The spiced tea with milk, and it's from the south. We call it Adani tea. It's with spices. It's very good. And you have to keep it brewing for a while. You don't just put the Lipton whatever. It needs to be like real tea, okay, with a lot of spices. What? Oh, very little caffeine. Yeah. Very little caffeine. So we drink the black coffee in the morning usually, and then the gishr, the other coffee throughout. Sometimes tea also. My dad drinks coffee 3 times a day, and he still sleeps well. Not me. For restaurants, I like Saba. It's in Northern Virginia. In DC, I don't know if we have. I'm looking at the Yemenis here. We don't have Yemeni restaurants, so that might be a business to start. There's Marib. Oh yeah, thank you. There's Marib in Springfield as well. And where's Saba? Do you know? Fairfax. Saba in Fairfax and Marib in Springfield. They're good restaurants. We're very big on food, so we need to have our breakfast. And there's a proverb that says, "As-sabuh ar-ruh." Breakfast is the soul. Really, it's very important. When I was working in Yemen, to get to the office, and we'd eat together, breakfast. We all are sitting down, having our tea, having breakfast, and then you start working. And then you stop for lunch. Yes, we actually take a lunch break, not on our desks. We sit together, we have lunch together, or you go home, you take a break from work if you can. Well, now not anymore, but some people can take a break, nap a little bit, and then go back to work, or these days, really, not really. You have to work till 5. But yeah, we're big on eating. Lunch is a big meal. Dinner is whatever, is not that big of a deal. Lunch is the main meal. And then some of us chew the gat, which is a nice moment to relax. And I believe that it forces people to take time for themselves. We talk about, self-care. We know how to do self-care. Every afternoon, you dress up, no matter how bad your day is, and you go and you hang out with your friends every afternoon, and you sit and you chew this gat. think of it as like people go for a drink, people, what's the equivalent? Yeah, when you go for a drink, but this is something, it's similar to that. A happy hour. It's basically, yes, it's a happy hour. It's a Yemeni happy hour every day. So that's a big, I think, cultural element.
What would be, if somebody wants to go to a Yemeni restaurant, what would be a signature dish that they would order?
Oof, that depends. Do you eat meat? Yes. Hanif is my favorite. Hanif, it's lamb, slow-cooked lamb. My other favorite is shufut. This one's my favorite. So it's with layers of luhuh bread. Luhuh is like a thin bread, kind of like injera, the Ethiopian bread, yeah, but it's not as sour, I would say. And then on top is like a yogurt-based mint, cilantro, garlic, bunch of greens. And on top you put pomegranate. It's a and then you eat it with salad. That one's one of my favorites too. But it's vegetarian, yeah. Shufut. Anyone else have a favorite? What? Fahsa? Oh, fahsa or selta. Who wants to describe that one? It's a dish of everything, basically. So you have like a stew. It can be a vegetable stew or with meat and like potatoes, and then you have fenugreek, which is hilba, fenugreek sauce. Sorry, that's my alarm. Sorry. Anybody want to continue the hilba? Hilba is a staple dish in Yemen, in Sana'a specifically. Sorry. It's a staple dish in the north specifically, and you almost with every lunch. It's very filling. You eat it, so it's in this round clay pot. Thank you, round clay pot, and you eat it with bread. And a lot of our food is communal, so you'll have one meal, one plate, and you eat together. Most of the time, traditionally, you don't have plates. You just have that one, and we all eat together. Someone asked me, "Oh, what did they do in Corona, in COVID? Did they all still eat together?" I said, "Yeah, they all still ate together." Yeah. Anything else?
Well, before we thank our wonderful speaker, I just want to say that with the U.S. escalating its attacks in Yemen and openly saying they're meant to destroy even more of the economy, and that this, of course, is an effect on all the people, especially since their attacks now are at the oil port and trying to create a shortage of gasoline. This is also the rumors that you started talking about of some kind of ground invasion. It's a very dangerous time right now. And back in 2019, when the US was so involved in the Saudi war on Yemen, there was a War Powers Act that we managed to actually pass in Congress, in the House and the Senate, saying that the US could not, without congressional approval, be involved in this war. It was vetoed by the president, but there is talk right now in Congress of reintroducing some kind of War Powers Act to try to stop the U.S. from what is unconstitutional, according to our Constitution, involved in military attacks on a foreign country without any discussion, much less approval in Congress. So those of us who have been going to Congress want to do more on this Yemen issue. And we do meet Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays in Congress from 10 a.m. till about, what is it called, usually 3 sometimes. Or, you can come from a shorter time, you can come for just a couple of hours, but we do want more people to be joining us in Congress. So if you're a regular and know how to add people to the WhatsApp group, can you raise your hand? All right, so you can ask either me or Cole afterwards if you want to be added to the group so that you know when you can meet us, where you can meet us, in case you're not coming exactly at 10.
And doctors are going on the 30th. Again, the doctors.
Yeah, not about Yemen, but yes. So I think it's been an incredible morning. Raise your hand if you learned something you didn't know about Yemen. Wow, okay, so that's every single, well, I don't know. Almost everything except for our Yemenis. But we want to thank you so much. Let's give Atiaf a warm round of applause. And of course, we're going to have more sessions because she said she wanted to start way back in history and didn't get a chance to do that. So we would love to know the history some other time. Thank you. Like the socialist part. Yes.
You guys are